I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. Just as a notice to everyone, Win TV is taping this meeting tonight. It is streaming live now on Win TV's YouTube page at youtube.com/WindsorTV5. It is also broadcasting live on Win TV channel 95. This program will be rebroadcast on channels 5, 95, and 96, and will be available on demand on Win TV's YouTube page. Next agenda item is audience and visitors. Does anyone wish to be recognized on the audience and visitors? Based upon the crowd, I'm not seeing any, but just want to make sure. Seeing and hearing none, we will close audience to visitors. Item number 3, I will recognize Mr. Fury for a motion.
Thank you. This has to do with the Clover Street partial roof replacement. I move that a project for the partial roof replacement at Clover Street Elementary School be approved by the Board of Education, as well as the education specifications for such project. Further, the completion of this project and authorization for the code compliance grant be implemented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Fury, second by Ms. Fissel, in regards to the partial roof replacement at Clover Street. Any discussion? Recognizing Ms. Delavelle.
So I don't see in this document anywhere anything related to cost.
So the estimate for the roof replacement is going to be about $150,000. Reimbursement from the state is usually between 48 and 52%. Those motions have already been had at the town council level and will be voted on again tomorrow night because the state has changed some language on how the motions need to be worded, so they will be redoing that tomorrow night. But the overall cost is about $150,000.
All right, and then we should get about half of that, you said, in state.
The town will, yes.
Now, you provide us a document from Hibbert and Rosa Architects.
Yep.
And I'm presuming this is an error that someone made, but it says construction bonus request, and starts off with Bucks Hill Elementary School does not house any of the special. I'm presuming that was a mistake they made and they meant Clover Street School.
Yes.
Okay. Just want boilerplate, I presume. All righty. Thank you.
All right, so it's going to be assumptive that the motion is going to be inclusive of any wordsmithing of the document that was provided. Have general consensus on that? All right. Any other discussion on the motion? For those, just to repeat, the motion on the floor made by Mr. Fury, second Ms. Fissel, is that a project for the partial roof replacement at Clover Street Elementary School be approved by the Board of Education as well as the educational specifications for such project. Further, that the completion of this project and authorizations for the code compliance grant must be, grant be implemented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same. Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Next on the agenda is the special education presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cook. Just before you take it, just want to recognize for the audience that almost the entire support staff under Mr. Carvello is here in support, so I just wanted to make sure I recognize that and thank you for being here tonight to support in this presentation. Dr. Cook?
Yes, thank you, President Lockhart. As Mr. Carvalho comes forward, I would like to thank our special educators for coming out tonight. We have our principals in the audience as well, and so that's great to have all this support. And early on in the school year, there was a request from the board to have a presentation done on special education in 504, and so this is the first half of that. We wanted to be very although 504 will be mentioned tonight just a few times based on, to show some comparison of numbers in programming, but we want it to be very clear that they're separate and they're not the same, and so we have separated that into two nights. And we've heard a lot as well from families and other events during the school year about our special education program, the strength of our special education program, and the supports we're giving teachers. And so it's really students. So it's really a great way to highlight our special education program with the board tonight and with the community via Win TV. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carvalho.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to share information.
Went to sleep.
It's all part of the show. Here we go.
You're back.
Regarding special education here at Windsor Public Schools. So about 5 years ago, I presented and did a presentation, and this year we probably do the presentation a little bit different. So what I'm going to start with is just do an introduction of who I am, and then from our Pupil and Special Ed Services Department, the PSCS department, will each introduce themselves, just professionally, just with their background, and then the audience doesn't know this, then they're going to just highlight who are the individuals who came out for today's meeting, because they are the biggest part with regards to the services we provide here for students. So you know me, I'm Stephen Corral, I'm the Director of Pupil and Special Ed Services, and just a quick professional background. Been in education for 19 years. I was a school psychologist for 12 years in Middletown Public Schools at both the elementary and secondary level. And during that time, I also did 6 years of adjunct instructor at Southern Connecticut State University in their graduate program for school psych. Subsequently, I came here, was the elementary special ed supervisor, and then moved along myself into the director position where I've been, I think, about 6 to 7 years. I'm happy to
Hello, good evening. I'm Angela Aaronworth, the elementary special education supervisor. A little bit about myself. So I've worked professionally in an out-of-district setting as a social worker. I've been in Windsor for quite a long time. I've worked for 6 years at Windsor High School as a special education teacher, and I've been a school administrator for over 10 years, both here in Windsor and in other districts.
Hi, I'm Christina Winkowski. I'm the secondary special ed supervisor. I started as a para-educator for the West Hartford Public Schools, and then was hired as a special ed teacher for Sage Park Middle School. About 5 years ago, I took the out-of-district job, so I worked with our special ed students who are in the magnet schools, the charter schools, the non-pub schools. And this year, I started as our special ed supervisor for the secondary level, and this is my 12th year in education.
Good evening, I'm Sarah Anderson Potts. I actually began my career in Windsor Public Schools. I taught for a few years before I became a Peace Corps volunteer and taught in Peace Corps for 2 years. And before I returned to the district as a special education teacher, I was the lead teacher for a couple years before taking on my role as the special education department chair at Windsor High School, and this is my 3rd year in that role.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Jackie Felder McIntyre, the supervisor for counseling. I've been in education for a little over 20 years now. Started my career in school counseling with the tech schools, and have been an administrator of counseling in various districts throughout the state, as well as in various positions in higher ed. And now I'm here in lovely Windsor.
And I just wanted to introduce here in the audience, I'm just going to ask the person to stand, they do not have to introduce themselves. We have Leanne Tyson, she's a special education teacher in our SPARK program. Marcia Yorn, OT for the entire district. Donna Boyson's our chief speech pathologist and speech pathologist at JFK. Christine Fiorellero, who is a special ed teacher at Pequannock. Jennifer Harrison, a special ed teacher at Pequannock. Michelle Smith, our school social worker at Pequannock. Dave Lemieux gets to split between Sage Park and the high school as our one of our school psychologists. We have Frank Scott, school psychologist at the high school. Jackie Owens, special ed teacher at Windsor High School. Margaret Levine, social worker at Windsor High School. Audra Celio, social worker at the high school. And Carmel Woodcock, one of our special ed teachers down here in the school district. So they had no idea I was going to do that. So there'll be some form of retaliation. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of them as well. So for tonight's agenda, within the next 2 hours, what we're going to be reviewing is special education law and some district responsibility. There's a lot of terms we hear overall, so just giving everyone a foundation. We're going to talk about special education services, our organizational framework, so my PSCS leadership team, what we cover, and our responsibilities, not all of them, but just some of the responsibilities we have. The team will be speaking about our special education service staffing, as well as special ed categorizations. We hear a lot of things about categorizations, and the really important thing that we take away from here is looking at the whole child, that students are not defined by a category that they are given through special education. And then we also have some Windsor Public Schools special ed data. What we're going to be doing during the presentation is we're going to stop at certain parts so that if you guys have any questions, you guys can ask questions as opposed to holding them all at the end, because I know sometimes things might come up as we're going through them. So when we talk about special education, the framework comes from the federal law of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is IDEA. And two concepts to understand, and over the next few slides I'll touch upon these some more, is regarding what's a free and appropriate public education in the state, as well as what is the student's least restrictive environment. So we'll talk about this, but those are two, you're laughing already. Yes, we'll talk about that. With regards to LRE, and what does LRE mean? LRE means both for FAPE and LRE, they're very individualized for students overall. So you'll hear many acronyms, PPTs, IEPs, so planning your post-team meeting is a meeting where we convene to discuss, initiate potential evaluations, determine eligibilities, develop students' education plan, or identify for services, and or review and revise. There's a few other areas like the manifestation determination, but when you hear IEP, that is all about the student's educational program. That has goals and objectives, service delivery in there, and when we have training and placement team meetings, there are required individuals there. So all of our principals who are here this evening, Ms. Earl at OB, and Ms. Peterson at Pequannock, Ms. Ravanola at JFK, Ms. Williams, at Clover, Ms. Jorgensen at Sage, and Mr. Sunday and I just the other day participated in a PPT together. They will typically, one of them or their designees are there, and then we have other individuals that are required as well. And then what we develop is the student's IEP. What is their plan? So there's a document that identifies the student's special ed services, their pupil, their related services, if they have any, as well as their strengths, their weaknesses, their accommodations, and their modifications. So when we talk about FAPE, the free and appropriate public education, these are the four key things to look at. It's provided at public expense, under public supervision, it meets the standards that are provided, includes appropriate preschool, elementary, or secondary school, and is in conformity with the student's IEP. So one thing that we always highlight, this conversation has come up regarding free and at no public expense. Those are the conversations that you always have at talking points and PPTs as what is appropriate and what is surrounding cost. And so the team here, including those who couldn't attend here this evening, do a really good job about talking about what is appropriate, what is cost. I always share that, special ed isn't an open checkbook that for everything. It's about talking and having dialogue surrounding what is the district required to provide. How is FAPE delivered? So as we said, through an IEP, it's in accordance with procedures set forth under IDEA. It's implemented appropriately, and it's in the student's least restrictive environment. Who is eligible? Later on in the presentation, someone will be reviewing the categorizations that we have under IDEA, and by reason of the disability, they must need special education. They require specialized instruction, and they may require related services, and we'll be reviewing what those related services look like. When we talk about least restrictive environment, it's to ensure at the most extent possible that the student is educated with their non-disabled peers. So many times what does happen, there's this feeling that we're saying, well, all kids then need to be in general education. That is not necessarily the case. Every student is looked at individually, one-on-one, And so for some students, their least restrictive environment may be in the general ed setting. For some students, their least restrictive environment could be an out-of-district placement. So we need to look at it overall, individually, for each child during the PPT. When you're going through the PPT process, you talk about students' present levels, you talk about goals and objectives, you talk about accommodations and modifications, and then the discussion becomes the where. Where does all of that takes place? And that is the talking point at the PPT surrounding a student's least restrictive environment. District reporting requirements, higher level of regulation for special education. These are just a small sample of the things my office and that I'm required to provide to the state, but we have to provide information regarding restraint and seclusion data. So anytime a student with special education is restrained and or secluded for emergency purposes, we have to provide information to the state. We provide information to the parents verbally and in writing within 24 hours. We are required to collect data regarding evaluation timelines. So every referral to special education is made. We are obligated by the state to have that implemented if the student's eligible at 45 school days. So all of this stuff is collected and provided to the Department of Education, who then provides it federally to the government. We have information on early childhood outcomes that we have to provide to the state in terms of how our students are doing, and specific information that is collected. Transition, kids who are in birth to 3, and then they are referred to special ed once we have them in 3. There's transition guidelines that we are required to follow as well. Placement with non-disabled peers. The state monitors the amount of students and the amount of time they are with their non-disabled peers, and it is something that they continually look at. So that is a part of a report and data that we collect through our IPs that's provided to the Department of Education. And then information surrounding disproportionality identification. The state will provide to everyone with regards to our, and here's an example, our African American students identified as students with emotional disturbance at a higher rate than is expected. And so the state has specific formulas that they use, and they will provide all of us information with regards to how that is. A few years ago, there was information regarding a rate of suspensions of students, 10 suspensions or more for students who were expelled, who were Black students, identified special ed. That was provided to us, and we had to identify how we were going to address that. So as you can see, special education through my office is regulated. This just hits 6 components of other things we are required to provide to the state. And so here's our organizational structure. This is not inclusive of all responsibilities, but one thing that I've done in our office is identify the district individual working aligned with the building. So from my role as the director, I oversee the entire district, so I have worked with every single supervisor here. I have worked with every single building principal here on specific cases this year and for my past 6 to 7 years that I've been here. I also oversee out-of-district placements. I have assigned a specific caseload that is just mine, and I am the student's case manager. And I also am assigned myself to Windsor High School. So Sarah Anderson-Potts and myself, the department chair, we work collaboratively together with Mr. Sunday with regards to special education. And as you can see through here, Ms. Uriworth, our elementary special ed supervisor, has all 4 elementary schools. And she also is assigned a set of out-of-district placements that she is a case manager to. The secondary, Ms. Wykowski, has St. Park Middle School off-site programs, including LP Wilson here. She oversees SMART, PEAK, as well as CBTA, including her out-of-district programs. Dr. Felda McIntyre has Sage Park and Windsor High School, and those are just her sites, but on top of everything else that's involved with colleges and all of that, she has. And then Ms. Anderson-Potts, our department chair, the asterisk is, she's at Windsor High School, but she teaches 2 class periods on top of being the department chair for the entire building as well. we're gonna go on to the next. Let me ask you, can you guys hear me okay? Because I have a speaker in there, or is that, do I need it or no?
You don't need
No,
Perfect.
thank you.
That was an accommodation that we no longer need to use for tonight.
God, I'm looking at the ceiling like it's going on.
Get rid
All right, so some of the things we do want to talk about and understand as we move forward is just special ed myths unplugged and what special education is or isn't. There is a thought that, everything comes from special education teachers. Primary instruction is implemented by the special educators and related services personnel only. Nope, the students need access to their general education curriculum. The individuals here work collaboratively with the teachers about the access and what does that look like. There are some nuances to that, like if there's a speech-only kid who's younger, and overall, primary instruction comes from the regular education teacher. There are thoughts that it's for those students, the kid's not doing well enough, so let's make him special education. That is not the case. There is criteria surrounding how a student is identified special education. And you'll see in a few slides coming further down the road regarding our prevalence rate and all of that. We put that information in there. Individuals feel that it's a consolation prize for not qualifying for Section 504. So Section 504 is separate from special education. It's regarding accommodations and modifications. I think part of the confusion comes, Section 504 still falls under me as well, so people struggle sometimes with understanding, but special education is entirely separate from Section 504. I've heard people say, not only in this district, but in other districts, that, well, they just need extra help, so let's give them special education, because that's what they need, just need extra help. So special education is not extra help. Special education is the student's been identified with a disability and requires specialized instruction. It's more than just extra help. There's concerns like the myth is it's a slower way to present curriculum. These students just don't get it. We just got to slow down for them. That's not what it is. There are many students who have average to above average cognitive ability, and they require specialized instruction for an assortment of reasons. And it's always determined by specially designed tests. That is a myth. Those tests and evaluations are used as part of the evaluation procedure under criteria we have from the Department of Education, but the tests in and themselves don't identify. It is a collective decision from the PPT team using the criteria from the Department of Education. Okay, I say good. So, up until now, does anyone have any questions? What's this one?
My question was around the, what is FAPE and the include an appropriate preschool, elementary, or secondary school education. So I understand that preschool is part of this regulation, right? And it starts at the age of 3?
Correct.
Okay, and so is that where our peer playmate program comes into play? So we have the students who require special education services, so then it's the peer playmate program is where then they engage in the educational experience with students who do not identify as having a disability.
Peer playmates are students who are not identified, correct?
Yeah, and that's
So
the
they're at
preschool program
level.
that we
Correct.
offer.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I understand.
Any other? Thank you for your question. So I'm going to hand it to
Okay, so what is special education? As Mr. Carvalho talked about, a planning and placement team convenes. It is a multidisciplinary team, and a lot of information is used in that process to help identify a program for a student that's really going to target their unique needs. We use some standardized data, we use observations, we use teacher reports, use family input. All of that comes together as part of the planning and placement team process once a student has been identified to design their special education program. Our focus in special education is to enable the child to have access to general curriculum. So always looking at ways to make that general curriculum available to our students in a way that works best for them. The specially designed instruction can be delivered by a certified teacher, can be delivered someone under their direction, as well as, in some cases, it is a related service provider such as a speech and language pathologist who may be delivering that specialized instruction depending on the needs of the student. So when is specially designed instruction required? So we have the IDEA definition of specially designed instruction here. It's very specific. As I've already spoken of, it's meant to address the unique needs of the student. It's meant to ensure access to the general curriculum so that the child can progress on those general education standards. And it's necessary for students who require instruction that's qualitatively different from that provided in our tiered model. And so what that means is we really take what we know about each student as an individual learner and design instructional programming that builds off of their strengths and targets their weaknesses. Accommodations versus modifications. So as part of a student's special education program, a team talks about what accommodations and modifications the child may require again in order to access their learning. So accommodations and modifications do differ. Sometimes we talk about them like they're, a team, but they are two different things. Accommodations really target how the student learns and do not alter in any significant kind of way what is being taught and what the expectations are. So when Mr. Carvalho talked about our faulty amplification, amplification would be an example of an accommodation that a student may require in order to be able to access their learning in a classroom. Other examples could include preferential seating, additional time to complete tests or quizzes. There's many different areas of accommodations and modifications. These are just a few examples. A modification really looks at an adjustment to what the student is learning. So the expectations are changed, and teams really carefully consider modifications and whether or not they truly are going to allow the student to access general ed curriculum. Some examples include reducing the amount of work to be done, providing alternative information, and also modifying how instruction is given and how learning is measured. So it's a definitive change. Okay, so what is the role of a special education teacher? So our special education teachers do many things. We tried to kind of summarize them in these slides here. First, they deliver specialized instruction based on the student's individualized education program. So it's outlined in their IEP, and that specialized instruction is going to look different depending on the curriculum demands of the student, given what grade level they're in. They're going to look different based on where the student is developmentally and what is expected of the student at that point in time. So it can cover many areas. Certainly academic areas is a significant place where specialized instruction occurs. Also organizational skills, social skills, behavioral needs, play skills, and transition or vocational skills for older students. Special education teachers provide specialized instruction based on the unique needs of the student, and that can occur in a variety of formats. So the special education teacher may work individually one-on-one with the student in order to deliver that student's IEP. They may work with students in small groups. They could be working either individually or in a small group in a resource group setting, which is the space outside of the general education classroom, or they could be working within the general education classroom. They also serve as the case manager. And so what comes along with being a case manager is one, having significant knowledge of special education law and regulation. Our special education teachers have to carefully oversee timelines. They facilitate and manage planning and placement team meetings. They complete lots of paperwork, one piece of which is the IEP. They communicate with families very frequently. And they are a significant resource in the building for supporting our students with special needs. A couple of other duties that they have. They collaborate closely with general education staff, as I said. Effective implementation of the IEP really is a team process. It takes everyone on the team to know how to support that student and to do their part. And so that case manager brings that team together at different points in time to check in, see how things are going. They conduct ongoing progress monitoring of student performance and IEP goals and objectives. So our special education teachers are collecting data on each goal and each objective written for that student that they are responsible for delivering. And then they are responsible for reporting on that progress at designated points in the year in writing. Special education teachers also formally assess students using standardized achievement measures. So they administer these measures, they score them, they write a formal report, they report on those at PPTs as part of the planning and placement team process. Okay. Related services. So this is the State Department of Ed Bureau of Special Education definition. It's very dense. I'll just kind of highlight that our related services are really meant to support student access to their learning. So some examples of related services that some of our students receive are social work services. Students may really need some direct instruction in social skills in order to be able to participate in classroom-based learning, to be able to engage with peers. Another example of a related service could be occupational therapy. A student may need some specific instruction on in the area of fine motor in order to be able to participate in skills and activities that students engage in classrooms that involve those fine motor skills. Next slide, Dr. McIntyre.
Good evening again. I am going to now talk about the different professional practices or professional staff members that exist within the department. There are 9 professional areas within our department, and they're listed here for you. In the next couple of slides, I'm actually going to speak to each of those areas and give you a little bit more in-depth knowledge as to what they do in their specific areas and how they're covering each of those. So you'll see on each of the slides, you'll see some overlap in some of the different areas. All of our staff are professional, certified staff members. Each area requires a specific certification through the state of Connecticut. So our school psychologists that are placed in all of our schools conduct psychological evaluations, but you'll also see that there's overlap as well with our school psychologists. Our school social workers deal mostly with our social histories and our biosocial assessments. They also conduct FBAs, which are known as functional behavioral assessments, and also behavior intervention plans for each of our students that they're referred to. Our school counselors are dealing with a wide range of students, and their delivery of services can range from in-classroom support, individual plans, responsive services, and also system support. What I want to make mention in regards to the 3 here is how students are referred to each of those professionals. So a school psychologist and a school social worker each have identified caseloads, and some of those caseloads are identified through the PPT process that was mentioned earlier and or the 504 process, or sometimes from teacher referrals, administrative referrals. And so the school psychologists and school social workers can work with students individually or in groups or collaboratively across the spectrum with other professionals within our department. The school counselors at the middle school level are assigned a caseload by grade level, and at the high school level, they're also assigned a caseload by grade level. So I just wanted to mention that. Our occupational therapists, physical therapists, and our school nurses, they all have specific areas that are very unique to their professions. Our occupational therapists, if you want to think about it, is working with students in their fine motor skills, helping students have access to various technology supports that they might need in order to make sure that their education is accessible and appropriate. Our physical therapists are working with our gross motor skills for our students as outlined in their IEP, and they target functional mobility and supports for students. Our school nurses are making sure that our students have the appropriate physical health needs throughout the entire building, in school, as well as sometimes after school as well, some of the after-school activities in our sports and clubs. And our school nurses also sometimes are managing specific healthcare needs of our students who might have intensive medical care. So behavioral or healthcare plans they might be managing for those students might have specific medical needs. Our speech language pathologists, our board certified behavioral analysts, and our assistive technology professionals are very different in their approach and also in their skill set. So our speech language pathologists, they play a key role in working with students who have speech, language, or communication needs. Our board certified behavioral analysts help to manage the behavioral interventions for our students, as well as providing supports to teams to develop and implement behavioral plans and coaching and professional development to staff. Our assistive technology professionals provide differentiated instruction through accommodating mediums and outputs using computers and technology, various technology tools and tablets and visual displays to make sure that our students may also have access to assistive technology.
Okay, so the next series of slides summarize our staffing across each of our levels. We want to kind of give you a picture of what our teams look like at each level. So these are our 4 elementary schools, and you can see that we have multidisciplinary teams across all 4 that are comprised of special ed teachers, social workers, school psychologists, speech and language pathologists, and nurses. As far as our staffing ratios, some of those are based on our special education population in the building. Many of our professionals, however, don't just work with our students with identified needs. They are significant supports to our entire school building as well. I just wanted to point out under speech and language pathologists for McQuonic, because we didn't define this anywhere else, but under the 1.0 FTE SLPA, that's a speech language pathology assistant.
Just like Angela pointed out, these are multidisciplinary individuals who work at the secondary level, and we're very lucky to have these individuals in our buildings at Sage Park, Windsor High School, and at the offsite program. I've also included in this the out-of-district students. So you'll see for Sage Park, we have 1 full-time social worker, but we also do contract another social worker to help the needs in that building. And I wanted to also point out that we do have 1 full-time special education teacher who works with over 100 special ed students who attend charter, magnet, and outplacement schools, and 1 full-time school psychologist who also works to evaluate and program for those students. That one full-time school psychologist also splits some of her time supporting the programs at LP Wilson, CBTA, Peak, Spark, and even the expulsion program. She does evaluations, attends manifestation PPTs, and generally helps out the team with student concerns. So even though those 2 individuals are listed with out of district, they do help other areas. That's it.
One of the parts I wanted to share also is we have district-wide positions. So we have our occupational therapist, our humans here, it's 1.2 FTE, so we do contract for someone for 0.2 time. So our occupational therapist, occupational therapy assistant, our physical therapist, and physical therapy assistant is contracted for up to 12 hours. They cover the entire district. So they're not necessarily scheduled to be in one building. They cover all 6 buildings. And I know for a fact, I can tell you, Ms. Warren has helped me with out-of-district placements as well. So these individuals, we wanted to just demonstrate how we've utilized our resources, and they cover our entire district. Our board certified behavior analyst, we have a full-time BCBA currently. The asterisk, so she's a full-time employee. The asterisk demonstrates that we have a contracted full-time BCBA also. That's under contracted services, and they work predominantly in pre-K to 2nd grade because something that we have identified as a theme is the overall need just to have that lens surrounding that as well. So we have a full-time FTE BCBA, but we also have a contracted full-time BCBA pre-K through second grade.
So another essential group that we wanted to highlight are paraeducators. We have currently 97 paraeducators who work across the district. We just wanted to explain a little bit about what their role is. They assist with providing students opportunities to practice their skills. They work under the direction of either a special education teacher, could be a general education teacher, or a related service person. And they have a variety of roles. So they could lead small group, they could provide individual instruction. Paraeducators can facilitate interactions between students who might need assistance with social interactions. They can make the accommodations and modifications on a student's IEP under the direction of certified staff. So they have a lot of different roles in the district. We had mentioned earlier that students are qualified or found eligible for special education. They have to be identified in one of these 14 categories. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can see there's quite a range of identifications for students. And in order to find a student eligible, the state has given teams, the PPT teams, guidance and guidelines on how to identify a student in each of those categories. So the PPT is responsible to follow those guidelines, go through that process to make sure that students are consistently and correctly identified with that particular category. Those guidelines also require that teams provide interventions and data that have already been done in general education before identifying a student with a disability. The other piece that's very important is that there are many different lenses at the table. We don't want to see one aspect of that student or that child. We want to make sure that we hear from the family, from the teacher. The whole child needs to be considered before finding a child eligible for disability. So it's a very careful process with significant guidance from the state.
So before we move on, this will be one of the stopping points. Does anyone have any questions in terms of what we just went over? Because the next set of slides that we're going to be going into will talk about specific to Windsor. Ms. Bissell?
Yes, can you repeat how many students are currently placed out of district?
That's on the slide.
Great, okay. And then what's a manifestation assessment?
Manifestation determination.
Determination, yeah.
It's a PPT where a student has been involved in a misconduct, and the team needs to determine if that misconduct is substantially related to the student's disability and if it's the district's failure to implement the IEP.
And who is a part of that discussion?
It is the PPT. So it would be, as Ms. Anderson shared, it is the planning and placement team. So it would be the family, the student special education case manager, it would be anyone else, an administrator. Typically for manifestations, one of us from PSCS district leadership is also in attendance at manifestation PPTs, as well as any of the pupil service who has a lens to offer with regards to the students, whether they are working directly with the student or they have information with regards to the student. So it is the same members of the PPT.
And I'm curious if any information is available to or made available to families about their rights in situations like that, and if they're referred to any sort of advocacy organization such as Favor or AFCAM.
So all families are provided their procedural safeguards and their rights at the beginning of every single PPT. Typically what can happen is, I know districts who send it out once, only the procedural safeguards, they're sent in the mail. When the invitation is sent home, we do, because I've sat in it, we ask parents regarding their procedural safeguards. Here's a copy of your procedural safeguards. As Ms. Yarenworth shared, it's very dense in terms of all of the legal talk, so we inform families, please review review it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me. Or anyone at the building that can speak to a principal, that can speak to one of the district leaders. And with regards to advocacy, I have referred families to advocacy. The state actually has a handbook, I think it's rather dated, I think it's 2007, but it's about parent advocacy, and there's 2 full pages of what are some supports that are available to families. So I myself, as well as I know my team, has provided families copies of that to families as well. And I've actually, even at times, have highlighted to parents, like, this is a lot of information. It sounds like you were looking for this. I would contact this. We've provided parents websites, CPAC, and so that they can contact them as well. As I say to families, you are advocating for your child, and you have these rights, so we want to make sure that you are aware that you have all these rights.
Great, thank you. I have a question.
I have, if I saved them all, I probably could build a tree with all the, Windsor's very good about giving you one every single time, and in the mail. And sometimes I said, no, thank you, I got it. So thank you, but they're really good about that. I want clarity on this. Did you say that there was a special education who services over 100 students out of district?
Yeah, so our special education teacher here for the out-of-district, what we've done, and we've had the position for years, even before I came, what I ended up doing was just repositioning in terms of the roles and responsibilities. So all of our magnet school kids, we have a special teacher, and she's here. She came, Erica Blake. So Erica Blake is the special education teacher who attends every out-of-district magnet school PPT for us. And Ingrid Fishman, our school psychologist, is the psychologist who typically does the evaluation. So we've talked at previous board meetings, if we have to evaluate a kid at magnet school, what is done, who does it? Well, Nebraska themselves, if it's a correct school, for example, they could evaluate themselves. My position is, and Dr. Cook has always supported this, we shouldn't be evaluating students because there are students, they may be attending another school. So they collaboratively as a team really work on all of our magnet school situations. So yeah, we have, I think the slide is 112 kids identified. You'll see there's a slide coming up that receive IEPs that are attending magnet schools. And so Erica Ms. Blake is the individual along with Ms. Fishman who attends. And at times one of us may present that as the administrator because Ms. Blake may start as the designee, but then she's going to do some of the evaluation. She can't play both roles. She can't be a special ed teacher.
And
Can I answer?
oh, absolutely. I just want clarity for them. I know. Hi.
Yes. What if a student has not been identified as a special ed student yet, but a teacher believes, whether it's kindergarten or first grade or whatever grade it could happen, that whether they're new to the district or they've come up and believes that they need extra services, the differentiation between needing extra services that would come under your umbrella versus being identified as a special ed education student with your whole list of categories of where that may fall. What does that teacher do? Do they go, who do they?
They can start with going to the principal. And so when I hear that they want to make a referral to special education, that's telling me that that teacher is suspecting the student has a disability. And if we're suspecting that student has a disability, then we have a child find obligation to determine whether or not we have to evaluate. So I would refer them to their building principal, and they're all well versed in terms of what are the next steps, make a referral to special education, and part of that referral includes what are the concerns, what are the interventions that have been done in place, have we informed the family of our concerns with regards to going on, and how have we documented all of that. Subsequently, when the referral to special education is made, we have a PPT, and that PPT determines whether or not we need to evaluate the student or not. So you can go to PPT for an initial referral, and you may not evaluate. The team may come together and say, yeah, sure, we need to evaluate the student at this time. Or they may say, I believe we need to conduct an evaluation to determine if there's a suspected disability, and if so, there's proper protocol and documentation and permission we must receive from parents.
And are new teachers trained to, as if they come to the district and they're new, as a new teacher and new to the district, on how to identify certain things that may say, I believe the student may have a disability?
I would say in terms of they are concerned about their student, they would have a relationship with their principal and their colleagues to say, what are some, I think this kid might have a disability, right? I think there's something more. And then they would be working specifically with their team. It's interesting you bring that up because this year with Dr. Albert and Dr. Cook, we talked about for new teacher orientation for the 1920 school year. Our department's going to be doing a part of that when they come on board to talk about what is special education and 504 as well. We're just actually going to start with 1920.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So in the next few slides, we will look at more numbers as they pertain to even different disability categories, but we've pulled for you a snapshot that's done on October 1st as part of a state report of the total number of students in special education, and this includes our preschool students, and it also includes our special education identified students who may be in charter schools, magnet schools, out-of-district placements. So as you can see, the trend has been that our numbers have increased quite a bit from the 2014-2015 school year up until this school year. And as Steve had mentioned earlier, some of the reports that we do have to submit to the state are often around the numbers of students in special education in the different disability areas, gender, race, ethnicity, so on and so forth. We also compiled for you, in addition to the number, the rate that the state has on their ED website for their performance and practice profile. And this number, for whatever reason, is only K through 12. So it is not including our preschool students or our students who are 18 to 21 remaining in district. So as you'll see, the trend for both the district and the state has been a gradual increase in the last few years, and we are quite a bit above the state rate. Due to that number being higher than the state, as an administrative leadership team, that is something that we are looking at. We're investigating to kind of look at our trends and try to understand why our numbers are higher. And we've been working with building admin as well to discuss initial evaluation referrals and just those numbers so that we're all aware that we're gradually increasing but over the state number. So what we're going to get into next is we're going to look at each. We're not going to address every single categorization, but we are going to talk about the most common disabilities that we do see in our schools. And then we're going to look at the rate of each of those disabilities. So specific learning disability is a very common disability that we're seeing in our schools, and it is one that has grown for us at a greater rate than some of the other disabilities. And it's really a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using language. And it really manifests itself in the inability to listen, think, speak, write, spell, or to do mathematical calculations. And we do talk a little bit about disabilities like dyslexia that also fall under this category. A student with a specific learning disability may be impacted in all these areas, or they only may be impacted in certain areas. So for example, there are many students who may have a specific learning disability in math, but their reading, their writing, their ability to spell is at an appropriate grade level. So if we look here, we break it down again between 2014-2015 school year and the 2017 and 2018 school year. We started, when we look at this data, in the first school year at 177 students, and we're up to 204 students, with an increase from 4.7 to 5.3. We are pretty close to the state rate of 5.2. And this data does not include preschool students or 18 to 21. other health impairment. And so if we're looking at the other health impairment, we're really looking at an adverse effect on the student's ability to be in the school setting and perform in a way that we would expect. And a lot of it is due to chronic or acute health problems that limit their strength, their vitality, their alertness, or if they have a heightened alertness. A very common other health impairment that's actually its own categorization is ADD and ADHD. And I know a lot of people are more familiar with those actual disorders than some of the others, but we have students who may have diabetes, epilepsy, sickle cell anemia, Tourette syndrome. There's a whole slew of health problems that can cause them to not be able to perform and therefore require specialized instruction in certain areas. And this is the prevalence rate for our other health impairment. So as you can see, we've had an increase from 89 students to 123 students. And the rate's at 3.2 this year, or the previous year, and it was at 3.1% at the state level. Another special education category that we support students under is the category of autism. And so autism is a developmental disability that significantly impacts verbal skills, nonverbal communication, social interactions, as well as a variety of behavioral issues. So some of those could be engagement in repetitive activities or stereotype movements, resistance to environmental change or changes in daily routine, and then unusual responses to sensory experiences. While it does say that autism is typically evident before the age of 3, that doesn't necessarily mean we always identify autism before the age of 3. We identify children if they meet the criteria for autism throughout their educational career. As far as our prevalence rate for autism, this is an area of disability that is growing in our district. So the current state rate is 1.8%, and we are at 2.3%. If you look back to 2014, we were more aligned with the state in that regard. Developmental delay. So developmental delay is an educational classification that's only available for children ages 3 to 5. Prior to a student turning 6, they must be reevaluated, and the team needs to determine if they continue to be eligible for special education, and if they are, it needs to be a category other than developmental delay. A developmental delay can be in one or more of the following areas: physical development, cognitive, social communication, emotional development, or adaptive and behavioral development. So the State of Connecticut Profile and Performance Report does not collect prevalence rates for the category of developmental delay. We do keep internal data that we track and monitor daily, and so just to give you some perspective on that, from 2014 to 2017, our numbers of students who were identified with developmental delay ranged from 36 to 40. Last school year, we ended the school year with 50 students identified with developmental delay, and at this moment in time today, we have 68 students identified with developmental delay in our district. So our youngest learners are coming to us with growing needs for sure. Emotional disturbance is a classification for students who really have deficits and weaknesses in the social, emotional, behavioral areas. In order to meet this criteria under the IDEA, there are several areas that the team needs to consider. They have to look at whether there's an inability to learn that can be explained by other factors. They look at interpersonal relationships, whether there's
and appropriate types of behavior under normal circumstances. Does the student present with depression or pervasive mood of unhappiness, or is there a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears with school or personal problem? In considering this classification, the team has to look at whether this presentation has been for a long time, a marked degree, and has an adverse impact on educational performance. So the team is really looking at a variety of factors here, and as we've talked about in previous slides, we're looking at evaluation data, we're looking at input from teachers, observations, input from family, and as students get older, they too participate in their meetings and have input into these discussions as well. As far as our prevalence rate of emotional disturbance, the state rate has remained fairly stable at about 1%, and our district rate has grown a bit over the last 4 years to 2.3%.
So just to go back for a second, we also thought it was very interesting that the state has not changed at all over the last 4 years at 1%. Yeah. But we did, so, and we did double check that just to make sure. So what we wanted to do also was just provide some information regarding our total number of outplaced students receiving special education and related services. So these are the students by PT who are programmed at a state-approved out-of-district placement. So as you can see, over the last 5 years, it's been variable. So 14 and 15 were similar, and then we went up 10 in 2016, 2017, and this is looking at it as of March 1st. Then we went down, and then we were back up again with regards to that. And there's a lot of factors that come into place with regards to when we determine a student needs to be outplaced. You know, when we look at the student's programming, at times this number is also indicative of a student who moves in that we may receive who's already from an out-of-district placement as well, or the number of students. So this is a number that I always look at carefully and always just want to understand what are some other things that we can do in terms of programming our students here. I'll talk a little bit about that in some slides coming up. Outplaced number of students receiving special ed and related services under DCF guardianship. So this is not all students under guardianship, DCF guardianship. This is only the students who are outplaced for DCF. Because we do have a number of families where DCF is involved, but they are in all of our 6 public schools and or in our magnet schools. So as you can see, outside of 15, 16, this is where our number is at in terms of, 5 years ago, we were at about 13. Currently, we are at 15. And as I shared before, we're looking at this as of March 1st. Students receiving special ed and related services who attend magnet school, I think Ms. Taylor, you had asked, before. And so as you can see, I know that we have discussed this at board meetings where students from magnet schools, they're coming back. The trend that we are still finding is that they're being identified for special education. And so in the last 5 years, we have gone up 30 students that have been identified in magnet schools. And so when we talk about our services, we always talk about a continuum of services. What are the things that we provide? And you know that it's not linear. It's not that you're going from here, this program, and then you go to that. The building leaders, as well as our department, work collaboratively talking about programming for students based on data that's developmentally appropriate at that time. And I'm gonna identify, Ms. Peterson and I've had this conversation about not putting kids into programs, about programming for kids, and I think it is continually a work in progress that we're doing that, and I think collectively, the leadership team, we've done some nice work moving in that direction, but I've taken several conversations, Ms. Peterson and I, as well as the other business leaders that we've done. When we look at our continuum of services, it is our belief system as a district that our students with exceptionalities can achieve academically, social, emotionally, and behaviorally. And I understand when people say, sometimes it's really hard to get Steve, like, this is going on, if there's a social emotional educational situation going on, but what is our belief system with regards to that student, and that all of our students can achieve. And it's critical to, as I said before, we're going to program for students as opposed to putting them into programs. And that's really just a different type of narrative in terms of looking at the whole child. When we do programming for our students, some of their programming may be in the general education classrooms. We want to continue to support our regular ed teachers. We want to continue to educate our regular ed teachers, get information from them with regards to that. Some of our programming is in our special ed preschool, as Ms. Aaron highlighted. That is what I am finding is our trend of our growing population. You have seen this as well. When we say, oh, there's another preschool, and kids come in. Our programming for our students can be in our resource room, and that means they would be working with a special education teacher within their classroom setting surrounding the goals and the objectives. And related services, any of our related services that we mentioned, any of the individuals that are here, programming involves them. And what does that look like? So some of that programming, and for people to understand what this, like related services can be in a social worker's office, but also can be in the general education classroom. And so that's why this slide previously, when you talk about continuum and you talk about related services, the programming piece, it's really looking at all of those different components. We have some social emotional behavior support programs. And we made that a separate bullet just to say this is about programming for students in terms of students who have difficulty in social emotional challenges. So TAP starts at the primary level, and then we have programs that go all the way up to the high school and our off-site programs as well. We talk about, when I talk about outplacements here, some of our programming Spark was here prior to my arrival, but our CBTA program was here prior to my arrival. Those numbers have grown in there, and I'm proud to say that our district is able to provide a level of programming. There's still work for us to do in our programming, because I don't ever think we've reached that point that I want us to reach at. I know the individuals in this room feel the same way. So we are able to program for many of our students in district, where other districts are unable to do that. Additionally, when we look at ABA program, we're looking at applied behavior analysis, understanding components, because you use applied behavior analysis across any of those settings, and some of the programming is more specialized for students and looks different. And that's why when we go back to the IEP, it's very individualized. We have programming that looks at life skills. And looking at those skills of what are those students going to do, because some of those students who in our life skills programs stay in our 18 to 21 program. Those are our students who we have identified required to be educated until the age of 21. That is not all students, and we talk about that as a team, as if they're going to be, remaining in our 18 to 21 program overall. So this is to provide an overview about the programming. There is work I think we should be proud of that we've done over the years, and there's work for us to continue to do to move forward with regards to our students. I'm going to pause here. I know there aren't many slides left, but does anyone have any questions specific up until this point?
I guess a question on one of the previous slides about autism. Is anybody who's identified as being on the autism spectrum considered special ed? So your Asperger's or some are higher level functioning, are you still considered eligible?
So it goes back to PPT. So a student can have autism, and then the state provides guidance regarding autism criteria, like their framework. The thing that I find interesting about autism is if the state calls it autism, it's now called autism spectrum disorder, right? And so you go back to PPT, and there may be students who have autism, and they are identified special education because the PPT has determined that they require specialized instruction and or related services in order to access. So, there are profiles of some students with autism, autism spectrum disorder, but they fall under autism who have difficulties with the organizational piece, social pragmatic piece as well. Because now they call it autism spectrum disorder, and there's some students who need life skills who are identified as autism. So yes, a student can be identified with autism and have an IEP or individuals who have autism who are not identified. Outside diagnoses don't automatically identify a student. It becomes a talking point to talk about referral to special ed if the student does or does not qualify for services.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question, and maybe it's actually a little bit farther back, if you don't mind. It's on slide 19. It just occurred to me when you were speaking about emotional disturbances, and there was a point made about deficits and weaknesses in social, emotional, and behavioral. And I was wondering, school psychologists specifically are noted as having the responsibility of meeting with students one-on-one. Oh yeah, thank you. Or in groups to discuss specific academic, social, or emotional issues. Can you explain to me, like, how this team works with our social emotional learning programming that's implemented across the district?
So across the let me give you the context of how they work with social emotional learning, because they would work with each of the building principals surrounding, what are the concerns we have at the building regarding social emotional concerns. And so I know that each of the principals work with the supervisors and with their pupil services individuals to say, we have a concern surrounding this student. What are the interventions and or services that we can provide? So I know that in some buildings, a psychologist and or a social worker, depending on the level, may be running a group because we're finding that this was identified as an area of concern. There might be a group of students in order to help support that social emotional learning. For some students, they respond in that group setting. For some students, they need it individual. So they would be talking with the building principal with regards in or the family, because as a former school psychologist, sometimes family would contact us directly and say, can you connect with my child regarding these concerns that I have that we're seeing? So I think it's very individualized based upon the concern and how the concern is brought up to them. But they definitely address the social emotional part. I have to say my psych social work school counseling team is really great with what is out there surrounding social emotional learning. What are the things that we're doing in the building, and how can we help support the buildings as well?
Okay, so when I understand how the second step program works, and maybe my understanding of it is not up to date with how it's currently implemented. So that's a lesson that's delivered by the social worker.
My understanding is that second step is a lesson facilitated by the classroom teacher.
Okay, that shifted. Okay, that was the most recent presentation that provided that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a tier one. But within those tiers across that, because I think you have shared previously regarding that there is a social worker, psychologist, a school counselor, or any of the individuals to help support that if you were identifying if you required something even more. But when you talk about second step, that is classroom teaching.
Okay. All right. So then this team of people are able to kind of address additional concerns that aren't being, or any concerns that maybe the classroom-based tier one programming isn't kind of getting to.
Yeah, they would have it, I would say to the, the principals could also answer that. But yeah, if there's something that's outside of tier one, so when you look at it, you want to look at it academically and socially, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ms. Celios, our chief social worker, and Dr. Williams, our chief school psychologist, myself, we're looking at tiered interventions on that social emotional continuum. And what do we have in place? So I know that they're working with their respective disciplines surrounding what are things we have in place currently.
Do you find that since there's been this greater awareness around like social emotional learning, even with PBIS around behavioral interventions and supports, like, is there like a greater number of students who are being identified or questions being raised about their social emotional
So if we talk about
capacity?
identification, it would be under one of the disabilities.
I know that language, yeah, I don't
So
know, maybe
that's
there's a better
specific-
word for this.
Yeah, I think.
Referred for
I
disciplinary issues because there's a lower threshold now for
I would
what's
say to the
expected?
buildings examines, why are we getting, what are the referrals? Where are they happening? Why are they happening? I do agree with you because I know you have shared a previous meeting surrounding social emotional learning, and I think that is great. I think there's a lot of components to that. I think we do a solid job here. I think there's continued work to look at social emotional learning is for everyone, and for everyone to understand. And we do have some really solid pieces into place. And I think the biggest piece is always coming back to the table and saying, okay, what's working and why is it working? And what does it look like? And having families and talking about them. I think it's extremely important that we talk about social emotional learning because it's the whole child, right? It's part of the grand picture of looking at everything.
Okay, I guess my question still stands around the referrals then. If, I'm just wondering, maybe this is a follow-up question for another time, but I'd be interested, based on the data that you are collecting, if since we've implemented these kind of district-wide initiatives around social emotional learning or even PBIS, if there's been an increase in referrals.
I think it's a great question, and actually Ms. Mykowski was alluding to that before. We're starting to look at information and what types of referrals are we getting and why and for what reason, because part of the referral would be the reason for the concern. So that's information. Yeah, we actually just were talking about it over the past year about, let's look at that more. Like, what are the referrals that are coming in? Because are the students identifying? When you look at this, what part of that question you just asked plays a role in this in terms of our identification rate? So those are things we are starting to look at as a department. It's questions that building leaders have also brought up, and we've talked about collectively as a leadership group, district and building wide. So it's a great question and something we're looking into.
Now it's asked specifically, and this is why I went back to the emotional disturbance where I started questioning this, is that if our prevalence rate is 2.3%, and that is much higher than the state rate, and that emotional disturbance is specifically linked to social emotional. I'm just wondering if there needs to be some professional development for staff around in our I know our educators are under a lot of pressure, so I'm not trying to put more work upon them. Please, I have a lot of respect for the work that's being done. I have 3 kids, and that's a lot. So I'm just wondering if there can be some professional development around how do we support these students in the classroom with the social emotional component instead of it just being a lesson? How do you embed that within the class? And I'm sure it's already being done, but that's just a question that comes to mind and a thought because this is a really high prevalence rate.
Agreed, and it's something that we do look at. So we do have staff, not only, I oversee people in special ed services, but I've even said to our bargaining units, go back to your teachers and ask them, what type of PD are they looking for? What type of additional training are looking for? I think a takeaway I also have from what you shared is, this is the identification. Kids are much more complex nowadays. They are.
Well, our world is more complex.
Agreed. In 2000, when I started in education, LD was pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's not. Now you have LD, and then you have some organizational, you have some executive functioning, you also have some emotionality.
Yeah.
And so collectively, as a district, we're always looking at, okay, let's understand that. And we're moving forward with not just placing kids in these little categories. Well, this is just a social emotional kid. Well, there's probably a lot more to him. Why is that happening? Why is it manifesting itself in that way? And it's not easy work. It's work where we have to have very thoughtful conversations and dialogue about understanding that and having the multiple lenses.
I just wanted to say thank you for a moment because being on the board for this many years, it's presentations like this that really I guess warmed my heart because there was a time 6 years ago that I didn't feel like there was that connection being made between the behavior and the what's what's driving that behavior. And it seems to me like that's the thinking that's really driving the decision making today. And I really appreciate that, because our kiddos are really complex, just as we are as humans. So
Absolutely agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great team. We have a really good,
Yeah,
strong
thank you.
team, building leaders and our staff as well. And just to your point, it brings me to, the district, that it's not linear. It's based on data. It's, looking at the whole child and all of those pieces. It's work, and I think we're ahead in some areas with regards to that across the state.
you are. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. What I did want to share in this epistle, actually, we talked about was we've done some PD for within our PSCS staff. So we've worked on systematic training to review collaboration related to service delivery and what does that look like. We provide staff with development on current educational trends, including special education law. We had a series, Dr. Dodd, he is from the Institute of Living, and talked about mental health and what does mental health look like in our schools. And he presented to the entire pre-K through age 21. And he said, we're not asking for a teacher to become the student's clinician, but we want you to understand the student that's before you and what they bring. So there's a lot of different layers with regards to that. So that's some PD that we've provided, and just talking with staff training to support parent involvement in the special education process. This is an area we're continuing to work on and getting feedback from families as well. And as we do this, as I said before, and I know collectively as a district, is, examining the whole child. Everyone's responsible for students with disabilities. And that our belief system, again, that our students with disabilities can achieve, and they can achieve at high levels. And they are complex individuals, and we need to support them and their families, and support our staff and our building leaders and district leaders who are supporting. And at times we agree to disagree, and it can be challenging, but we continually need to move in that direction and provide continuum of services. We have to explore, learn, and grow. It is about, we are adult learners, so we are responsible. And I think it's understanding that narrative too. We have control over our own behavior. And that's sometimes a hard concept for adults to understand. When students are in a moment of panic, just talking about the social emotional, it is our role in this room, everyone, and in our ability to be calm with that. And that is very hard to do. It's very challenging to do. And not only the social emotional piece, the academic piece. What are our academic issues? Those academics and social emotional go hand in hand. And so this was something that we've seen from the Council for Exceptional Children. And I just like to say, they said, we're not here to put kids in a box. We're here to show them that there aren't any boxes. And so I think we've talked about that overall as a district and in terms of what we're doing. Since you asked all your questions, thank you.
Well played.
So thank you. This was what we have presented. We hope it provides a great and really solid overview of what we do here in the district. And we tried to really look at it overall and just kind of funnel it down to what it means to be Windsor. We said we are Windsor, and this is what we have here to provide. So outside of any questions that were asked, if there's any additional questions, my team and I are available.
Anybody? Hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is announcements. Ms. Taylor.
Oh, goodness. Myself with me. I don't think I have any announcements officially, but I just want to thank you for all that you do. It's special to me because everybody knows my kiddo is special to me. Mm-hmm. But it's necessary for, to Michaela's point, Ms. Sissel's point, for our district to hear it. I think it seems very easy sometimes, and it seems like, you guys have the education, handle it, but every situation is different and every child is different. So this is very, very important work, and And I hate to add more things to your plate, but maybe if you could do this, I don't know, maybe biannually instead of every 5 years, because things do change. And I think that was a big, huge chunk of time to not have some updates of what's going on in the district and get some stats here. So, I don't know, maybe something like that could be done. That'd be great.
Noted. Ms. Delavelle?
Well, I don't think I need to repeat what Ms. Taylor said because she did such a good job. So I'll just say ditto. Thank you.
Ms. Khan?
I just want to say thank you as well to everyone for coming out. I think the fact that your team, you guys all are coming collectively as a team just kind of shows the unity and how supportive you are of each other. So I do appreciate everybody coming out. And of course, the presentation is very helpful and informative on how our district is doing things in special ed. So thank you.
Mr. Alec?
I just want to say thank you all for being here tonight. The presentation was definitely well done. So thank you very much. And I have no announcements this evening.
Mr. Fury?
Just add the same thing. Thank you to everyone who was here and your collective team. I know many people on your team. I've known them for a number of years, and we're very lucky here in Windsor to have such great educators in the district. And thanks so much for the principals coming out to support this as well. Thank you.
Ms. Fissel?
I already made my comments, but thank you so much. It's great to hear what's happening across the district. And I did have a general announcement. This Friday is the 4th annual State Education Resource Center's Conference on Dismantling Systemic Racism. And so it's this Friday from 8:30 to 3:30 at the Connecticut Convention Center. And there is still spots available, so you can go onto the website and register. And it is open to the public as well. So I would encourage people to go and check it out. It's a really great conference.
All right. On behalf of the board, I want to thank every one of you for what you do for our children. The town hears about it, but they probably sometimes don't understand what you actually do and what you bring to the table. But I can tell you one thing, there's a lot of people that move into town that need those services because they know Windsor does a very good job in providing those services. So it's well known what you do by those who actually need the service. So truly appreciative for everything you do for our children. Mr. Fury, I will recognize you for a motion, sir.
Yes, I move the Board of Education enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing information containing confidential student record, and to invite Superintendent Dr. Craig Cook to be part of the discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mr. Fury, second by Ms. Fissel, for us to go into executive session for discussion of confidential student record. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Just for the public record, we will go into executive session, seeing that there are no audience to visitors. After we are done with executive session, the meeting will adjourn in executive session with the doors open. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.